Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. We have a couple of people joining. We've got Shaun Gray here to kick us off, and he's going to be telling us all about strategy for planning your COVID wedding, which really is kind of what brings us all here today. Regardless of the kind of wedding you're trying to throw, it's tricky to even do the planning right now. So we wanted to make sure that we created an opportunity for all kinds of couples, regardless of whether you have a health concern or whether you're just sensitive to the situation our community as a whole is in right now. So we appreciate you guys joining us. We're going to learn a lot today. We're going to have a good time. And definitely, feel free to either drop your questions as we go into the chat, and our speakers can address those at the end of each talk. But yeah, let's dig on in. Shaun, take it away.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. And, I was so excited to participate in this. I had done a few videos on TikTok and other social media networks surrounding tips for just a COVID conscious celebration. And so when the opportunity was presented to me to speak in a little bit more detail with interested parties and people in the industry, I jumped at the chance. Everybody else, 2020, how it got going and ended was not at all how I had planned for the year to go, not just personally, but also with my business. And I'm so sorry I got so excited about the topic, I didn't do my part in introducing myself. So my name is Shaun Gray. I own Gray and Associates Events. I've owned it here in the Houston area since November of 2011. I am a regionally and nationally decorated wedding and event planner the nation, really. And as I was saying earlier, 2020 kind of did a bump in the road for me, so to speak. I had every intention on reworking the business and launching it in sort of a more exciting, different way through participation with, large bridal and wedding expos and showcases. And that kind of got sidelined due to COVID, not because myself and my own personal health risks, but my parents are elderly and I'm the only one care of them. So I didn't really want the risk of being out in public with hundreds and thousands of people, and then through the course of grocery shopping or assisting them with their tasks, expose them to the virus. I'm a moderately healthy 30-something-year-old man, so I wasn't as concerned with my own health as I was with those around me. And so the good news is that we know a lot more about the virus than we did when it first started back in January and kind of swept the nation starting in last March. Through science and health officials, we know how to best protect ourselves when engaging in the activities that we all love and quite honestly took, whether that be going and shopping or going out with your friends or your SIG for a night on the town. You just have to do things a little bit differently. And that same care and concern should be put into your wedding celebration. We are kind of seeing the light at the end of the tunnel with the virus, with the vaccines that have rolled out and been starting to get into people's arms. But the reality of the situation is, by best estimate, we will not be completely back until at least July or August. And so if you're planning on hosting your wedding celebration before then, or even right around then, it's good to have some tips in how you can best protect yourself and your wedding guests. And that doesn't mean cancel it altogether. 2020 was also the year of the cancellations. There were a lot of debate and news stories about events getting canceled or postponed. By and large, all local municipalities have kind of been up against a wall in terms of allowing these celebrations to still happen while encouraging the guidelines through the CDC to go ahead and take place. So aside from the all-important, what everybody knows, social distancing and masking, I did want to cover a couple of things that you can do for your wedding celebration to still be COVID conscious and facing together. And the first one is kind of getting away from guest served buffets. So when you think about the meal that you're offering during the reception, it's always kind of been two choices, traditionally, either plated or buffet. And when you think of buffet, you go from an area where 100, 200 wedding guests are all spread out and seated at their table. And then for about a 30-minute time period, they all line up together and then go serve themselves their wedding meal. Well, that's hundreds of people touching the same ladles, hundreds of people touching the same surfaces. And then when you get back to your table, you're then eating your meal after having touched all of those surfaces, even with the best hand sanitizing stations and hand washing habits that you have all come to practice in your daily lives. Hopefully between you and me, let's just say during COVID, we're all practicing good hand hygiene. You would literally take 2 to 3 hours to get everybody through that buffet line if you were sanitizing the equipment after every use as you should be. So to alleviate that, not necessarily plated meals is obviously the best way to go. That way it's just the server bringing your plate to you. But in cost saving and budget friendly tip mindset, if you are dead set on having a buffet just because it's easier or less expensive, you want to rely on your catering staff to actually serve the buffet off. That way you're minimizing how many times a surface or a piece of equipment is touched by the greater number of individuals. So that's definitely, cater served buffets is definitely a top tip in how to be more COVID conscious for your wedding celebration. In addition to masks and social distancing and sanitizing stations that you have throughout the course of your wedding, it's important that you want to make sure you're keeping people who are showing symptoms away from your wedding celebration. So before COVID, I'd go out to work and I might have a sniffle or a couple of coughs and not think anything of it. There was potentially some sort of viral infection, whether it be the flu or bronchitis or just a common cold. My immune system was working through that. But with the presence of COVID, there could be a much more serious, more transmittable infectious virus working through you. And the only way to kind of stop yourself in your tracks and say, hey, I'm going through something, is to be checked for the symptoms. We're all aware happen when you go into a doctor's office or a large facility. The questionnaire: have you traveled? Have you been in contact with anybody? Blah, blah, blah. What else that they do is they take your temperature to make sure you're not unaware of the fact that you may have a low-grade fever, which is the telltale sign that your body's fighting a virus. Before we get into HIPAA and medical symptoms and things that you're battling, I'm not I'm not advocating to step on any settled law or current practices of how things happen. But I will tell you that there is a industry leader here in Houston, somebody that a company that I've worked for almost as long as I've been in business, called DJU Productions. They're a audiovisual DJ. And right after COVID kind of swept the area, they came out with a service offering called CrowdScan, which is a professionally attended device that every guest stands in front of, and it reads their temperature and doesn't like blurt it out over the loudspeakers and everybody point and guffaw at the fact that somebody could have a fever, but it does let that trained professional know that that individual, for whatever reason, didn't pass the temperature scan. That's just one more layer of conscious or layer of protection that you can put to ensure and give yourself and your guests the peace of mind that you are taking all of the precautions and all of the steps necessary to have the safest celebration in the time of COVID-19. So we talked about caterer, we talked about the screening that takes place when guests start to arrive to your wedding. Now, a big one that you might not consider or have even thought about is, so you and your SIG get ready to, or by now your husband or wife get ready to go cut your cake. And it's such a fun time for pictures. I'm sure the photographers that are present or are coming up later in the afternoon can attest to this. You know, cake cutting photos are fun and they're staples in any sort of wedding album. You want the photo where you're feeding each other cake, or if you're a little more rambunctious, you're shoving cake into each other's faces. I'm definitely not saying get rid of that. We should still absolutely have. You is, do we need Sally from accounting running from the back of the reception hall all the way to the front, elbowing Aunt Gina out of the way to stand there and laugh and record the 5-minute event on their cell phones? That answer is no. So from a planner standpoint, this has always been a tool for best protecting the reception timeline to make sure the event ends on time and every piece that's important to the couple still gets put into their wedding reception. What I'm about to time saver, but also it helps best protect the exposure to the potential COVID-19 virus, and that is to cut out the ceremonial cake cutting event for the reception. So after you eat your meal and after you maybe take a few photos or go talk to a few guests, that's when the planner or the venue person would then take you over to the wedding cake. And then the DJ would play Sugar by Maroon 5 or whatever else your cake cutting song is. And then all of the guests run over to the cake, gather around, take out their phones and start laughing and talking and taking photos and videos of you cutting your first cake. This creates potentially an extremely not ideal situation for your photographer and videographer, because you want them to have the best opportunity to take great photos and videos, and you could care less what your childhood friend Becky, who you haven't seen in 15 years, what image she gets, because you paid thousands of dollars for these professionals to get the photos and videos done. So if you take the song out of the equation and take the announcement of what you're about to do out of the equation, cut down dramatically the amount of guests that are up and around your cake, super close together, super jam-packed, laughing. They should be masked, but they probably won't be masked. So you want to just cut the opportunity for them to gather for those several minutes together close. go up by yourself with your cig, cut the cake, still smash it, still feed it to each other, but it's just you two up there with your photographer and you two up there with your photographer, videographer, and 40 to 45 wedding guests all huddled in a small corner in your reception venue. So I think that goes a long way in not sacrificing what your day still feels like, but cutting out all of the little instances where you could potentially have a COVID spread at your event and not even know it. Tip. So aside from masks and sanitized station, of a temperature check that's safe, aside from making sure that your caterer is actually choose to go the buffet route, and aside from cutting off the ceremonial cake cutting, you also want to think about limiting the amount of guests that are seated at the table. So you can get away with 8 on a 60-inch round and 10 to people try to push it to 12 around a 72. I want everybody to think about seating no more than 6 people at a round table for the duration of their wedding reception. It does not give the full 6 feet of distance between your wedding guests. That really proves to be not possible when you think about everybody running up to the bar and everybody going up to say hello to you. It's impossible to keep all of your guests 6 feet apart for the reception. But what you can do is do everything in your power to limit the bubble around everybody during the reception. So instead of packing people like sardines around your wedding tables to do what? To eat or drink, which is times that everybody is socially acceptable to be unmasked anyway. You want to limit the amount of people that are so that there's some real elbow room, some real space happening around that table. Now, what that does really is kind of increase the amount of tables at your reception by a half. So instead of 10 tables, you're thinking 14 to 15 tables. There are exceptions to 6 people at each table. If you have a large family that is all under one household, or, one sort of family's coming and the Lee family is coming, and they're both up until this point have been in a shared COVID bubble, it wouldn't be unsafe or in poor taste to put those families or those households together seated at a table, because they've been, I don't want to say quarantining, but they've been holding each other accountable for their activities during this time. So celebrating your wedding with you wouldn't be a far do together. So keeping people at no more than 6 people at each table will again be one of those ways where you can keep your risk of COVID spread low during your wedding celebration. And the last tip before I recap and open it up to questions and discussion is really something that we don't often think about, but aside from an outdoor ceremony, where are we gathering for our cocktail hour? If we're having a cocktail hour, are we gathering in the lobby of the hotel? Are we the ballroom and calling that a cocktail hour? Where are we doing it? In the age of COVID-19, and when you're thinking about hosting a COVID conscious celebration, you definitely want to move that cocktail hour outdoors if weather permits. And here's why. There are no assigned seats. In fact, for a cocktail hour that will probably be attended by 70 to 130 people, there's really only 8 to 12 surfaces where guests find to sit on. And outside of that, they're all gathered around small cocktail tables to put their bite on or set their drink on while they converse. Unless you have that sort of outdoors, you're really getting into a situation where the air circulation isn't ideal. People are all drinking because they sat through your reception for 30 to 45 minutes. We're all ready for a little libation, so they get their drinks, so they're drinking. If you open that cocktail hour area up to the outdoors, it allows people to spread and gather in a large, infinite amount of air circulation versus in a foyer or where the spread could continue to happen. So those were just a few tips that I wanted to touch on. It's really 5 things that you can do that is not foolproof. It's not completely 100% sure to stop the spread, but it does start to give you some peace of mind that as a host during a global pandemic, you are really taking steps to ensure the safety of not only yourself and your significant other, but also your friends, family, and the whole slate of wedding guests that you want to ridiculously happy time of you finding your forever person. And so just to recap again, those 5 tips were plated meals are optimal from your caterer during the reception, but if you have to go to the buffet route, make sure that your caterer is the one that's serving the buffet. Sanitation stations, yes. Masking, yes, but also implementing some sort of temperature check or some kind of safe, practical, and lawful screening technique that you can put in place that is not intrusive, but does go a long way to educate the wedding guests that they are safe to no ceremonial cake cutting, which basically means no DJ announcement or special song played while your photos are being taken by your professional photographer to have of you two cutting the cake. Not having more than 6 people gathered at your reception table during the course of your reception. So you want to make sure you keep it to a max of 6 people around a 6. And then wherever possible, weather permitting, always move your cocktail hour outdoors. So those are really, again, just 5 quick tips that you can use to think about how your day looks if you're hosting it during the COVID-19 time, which is foreseeable future. And with that, I would encourage you all to follow my company, Gray & Associates Events, on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram with @GrayEventsHOU, and also my personal planning TikTok profile is I'd be more than happy with my time remaining to answer any questions, not only on COVID, but if you just want to pick the brain of a wedding planner, I'd be happy to discuss some other wedding tips. I wish you so much joy and fun during the course of this wedding planning time that you're embarking on. And yeah, thanks again to New Heritage and the Unstravaganza hosts for inviting me today. I've enjoyed it. Open the chat real quick, make sure I didn't miss any questions. One thing through the age of COVID that I have not gotten my head around is how to quickly transition to make sure that I'm not ignoring chat. So let me pop over there real quick. And then y'all want to stay around for the incomparable Tiana Hall discussing all things wedding entertainment coming up just after me. She just popped in. Love her. If you haven't gone and listened to her, followed her, watched her do all of that, I'm sure she'll plug herself, but she's phenomenal. Okay, let me look into this chat real quick. It's not opening up. Natalie, if you're around and you real quick.
Yeah, I had a question. I was curious how distancing might affect timeline. Like, I was especially thinking about formal photos. Like, are there parts of the day that take longer now?
It's a great question. Yes, the answer is yes. So you'll want to make sure if you threw everything I said out the window to do it how I want to do it, if you call everybody up to serve themselves in the buffet, you still can't call all your tables to line up together. And frankly, we're going to have a little bit of PTSD for this whole coronavirus precautions that we've all had to endure for a year for a while. So nobody's going to run up to the buffet line to be crammed in like sardines for an elongated period of time anyway. So you'll want to think about how much safely move guests through a buffet line. So instead of doing 3 to 4 tables at a time, you really want to just do 1 table at a time. Let 1 table get up, move through the buffet line, and then call another table up. So that's an area where your timeline will be affected regardless of what you do. Formal photos, when done correctly with a professional team of photographers and coordinators assisting you, you kind of carve out formal photos really aren't being pressed time anyway. So during cocktail hour right after ceremony, that won't necessarily change in terms of, kind of looking at a timeline through COVID lens. But you did just bring up another point, which now you're going to make me sound like the bad guy, but you might want to consider doing a more intimate send-off at the end of the night. Just again, thinking of now they're all drunk. I mean, not for any period of time, then they're probably a little looser than they were in the beginning. So now you're going to have your 7 guests crammed up, lined up together, waving a sparkler and cheering you on or blowing bubbles. You got to think about the amount of droplets that leave your body through the course of just everyday activities that we take for granted. Those sorts of things, if you have your guests line up for a send-off and you do not participate, you're just continuing to potentially spread the virus further.
Okay, that
so
answers
if I believe that was the
yeah, that helps.
Again, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Shaun. All right. So, Miss Tiana.
Yes, of course. I am Tiana Hall. I am the band leader and vocalist for the Houston Jazz Band and the Texas Jazz Band here in Houston, Texas. We are based here in Houston, of course, but we also travel throughout the state of Texas. We are versatile in that we go as small as a guitar vocal duo or even a solo instrumentalist, all the way up to an 18-piece jazz orchestra, so a big band. So I've been in the events industry now for, about 17 years. And I specifically have been focusing on jazz and the swing era for about that long as well. Before that, my background was in opera and musical theater. So hence the reason I'm a bit of a cartoon character of a human. But I've really loved getting to know the events industry and all of the people in the community here in Houston and throughout the state of Texas. our NACE and ILIA organizations here in town have been a great community for all of us to get to know each other, and fellow frienders, as we like to call each other. I am so glad to be a part of this, and thank you for asking me.